All right, let's go right now to, actually, let's bring into this conversation somebody with a very different perspective on this, Anthony Gray. Anthony Gray is an attorney who is one of the attorneys who represents the family of Michael Brown. We've spoken with him several times over the last few days. Mr. Gray, I'm happy to bring you back into the conversation tonight, as it seems like it's another very difficult night on the streets in Ferguson.
Absolutely, absolutely. It looks a little bit chaotic. You hear the sirens going off, and you see the bright lights being shined on the crowd. I know that has to be disturbing to the neighbors and to the community at large. I just don't know what the answer is. I understand that this is an experiment for us in St. Louis. We don't necessarily know how to deal with this type of situation. We've never had it before, at least in my lifetime. So I just don't know how to react to this. But I am watching just about everything that I can on television.
Do you, when you described it as an experiment, now when we spoke a few hours ago, you described St. Louis as basically being a living laboratory right now in terms of trying something that it's never tried before. Do you mean that both in terms of what the police are trying to do in the way they're reacting to these protests, but also what the protesters are trying to do by pushing so hard to be out there in the streets despite all this risk and despite all this chaos?
Yes, Rachel. I mean, you hit it on the money. It's a two-way laboratory experience. I've never seen, again, and I've been living, I'm 50 years old, so I'm half a decade. So I just never seen protesting like this. And the people that are out protesting think they have a fundamental right to do that. They're basing it on maybe some TV show or something like that, because clearly they don't have experience in it. You can look at the age of the people that are, and I don't like to necessarily use the word protest all the time, just kind of supporting whatever cause they think they're out there to support. And so there's some pushback because they feel in their minds they have a right to be there, and the police feel like they have a right to direct how they should be there. So it's a little bit of a showdown, too.
I mean, when you get to the basics here, this is obviously about your clients, their son, being killed by police. This is a community that rose up in anger about alleged excessive use of force by police, excessive use of force by a mostly white police force against a mostly black population in this town. And now we're seeing it extrapolated into this whole other type of confrontation. Do you think, I was going to say, do you think that police could be handling this better? I will not insult you by asking that. I'll ask instead, can you imagine the police handling this well from here on out, this ending constructively from here on out? Can you imagine a positive end from this point forward?
You know, because I'm just an optimistic person, I'm just going to say yes, because I view the world from a perspective that the glass is half full. So I'll say yes based on who I am. I really don't know, but let me just make this observation. I think the whole situation would be different because Ron Johnson has a presence, he has a heart, and everybody felt his approach in the beginning. I think if all of the officers that were standing behind him carried the same type of emotional attachment that he felt, then I think you would probably be witnessing a different scenario. Now, that's just my guess. I just see him as being out there all by himself in terms of the connection that he talked about, and you see him out there hugging and shaking hands in the early parts of this, but you didn't see an entourage of them doing that. You just saw one guy. And so the people behind them, you know, I'm not so sure that they really carry the same kind of feelings to the street that the commander of those guys carried to the street. So I don't know. It's a testing situation, Rachel, and we'll just have to see how it plays out.
In case you're just joining us, what you see on your screen right now is live footage from Ferguson, Missouri. It's about 12:30 a.m. on the East Coast. It's 11:27 local time in Ferguson. We're speaking with Anthony Gray, who's an attorney for Michael Brown's family. Michael Brown, of course, the young man who was killed by a police officer in Ferguson last Saturday. Mr. Gray, I had one last sort of big picture question for you. And one of the things that you have done as an attorney for the family is that you have been sort of an emissary from them, being a sort of public face, being willing to come on shows like this and have this kind of public conversation. And you have conveyed the family's wish that people continue to protest, but that they do so in a way that is constructive, nonviolent, and dignified. Why is it that the family does want people to continue to protest, to continue to get out there?
Well, because they know as well as I know, and perhaps you know too, because you're so intelligent, that by acting in a violent way, looting and rioting, that completely distracts away from what occurred on that Saturday afternoon. This becomes the story and not Michael Brown Jr. and all the what I consider to be positive potential that could come out of it with a national discourse about policies and the like. We're kind of losing the momentum that could have, potentially been made in that direction, because you're losing people with this, in my opinion. You're losing people who may want to otherwise support Mike Brown Jr. because they see this activity, and of course they're associated with him, as opposed to the officer who was the one that triggered all of this. He's not getting that backlash, but Michael Brown Jr. will suffer, in my opinion, as a result of what we're witnessing tonight, and I think that's very, very unfortunate for this family who doesn't want to see that.
Anthony Gray, attorney for Michael Brown's family. Thank you for being with us tonight, sir.
Thank you for having me, Rachel. I always appreciate you.
Thank you. I want to say one of the things that you've just seen just in the last few seconds here, again, this is a live shot from Ferguson, Missouri right now, and some of the cloudiness you're seeing here, at least our reporters and producers on the scene are telling us that is tear gas that's clouding your vision there, as well as theirs much more acutely. But one of the things that you've seen, which may be an unfamiliar sight, is these people in yellow, bright yellow T-shirts that say amnesty on them. We've seen a few of those in the last few minutes. Some of those have been picked up on our multiple cameras on the scene. I believe, I stand corrected if this is not true, but I believe that this is the first time that the group Amnesty International has ever deployed civil liberties observers to an event in the United States. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, other groups like this are regularly deploy observers, human rights observers, around the globe when they know that human rights are threatened, and they think that having observers there may help avoid some of the worst abuses, or at least bring attention to them when they happen. I don't know of another time in which Amnesty International has deployed those type of observers in the U.S., but they have today, and that's who you'll sometimes see in these yellow yellow shirts. I'll also tell you that in terms of the police presence, I think it's being, there's a misapprehension right now that because the National Guard was called out today, and because so much of the police presence that you see out on the street tonight looks like a military force, I think there's been a misconception that this must be the National Guard on the streets of Ferguson that we're seeing. We have no indication that the officers who we've been seeing on our cameras tonight are themselves National Guard. To the contrary, what we were advised is that those National Guard troops would be held back specifically at the police operations center to avoid that being targeted essentially by protesters to keep that place open. That looks like a National Guard vehicle. That looks like a National Guardsman there. But them providing command center security is not the same as them being on the front lines confronting protesters as members of the United States Armed Forces.